Welcome to Amidon Planet. I'm your host, Joel Amidon. Thank you for joining me on this never-ending quest to learn how to teach better. Today on episode 96 of the podcast, it is a celebration and a conversation. This past spring, I received notice that I was awarded full professor status by the University of Mississippi. Woohoo! And when I shared that news with folks, I received a couple different responses. Some in academia would say, congratulations, that's a big deal. Some were just confused because they thought I was a professor already. And some would just blindly say, congratulations, and then immediately ask, well, what does that mean? And you know what? I have the same question. What does it mean? What does it mean to be a professor rather than an associate professor or an assistant professor, which is the various stages you'd go through. You go through assistant, then associate, then to full. And that is the point of this podcast. So, Amidon Planet is about learning how to teach better. And then my whole goal is to lead people to love others through teaching. And so what does this new role and responsibilities of being full professor maybe mean for those aims, right? And so I wanted to have a conversation, with someone who's already in the role. And to help me, I asked Dr. Dorothy White, who is professor of mathematics education in the Department of Mathematics, Science, and Social Studies Education at the University of Georgia, to join me for a conversation describing our respective journeys through academia to full professor, and then trying to figure out what does this role mean and what our roles and responsibilities are to the field, and ultimately in leading people to love others through teaching, right? And again, that's kind of my aim here. And so having that conversation and then also getting a little bit of feedback from other folks in similar roles, and just, again, trying to make sense of what does it mean? Because that's the one thing that's weird about this job of being a professor is that you do have some agency. I mean, you have to teach your classes and you have certain roles you have to fill, but then there's other areas where you can fill them. You can fill them, or they can be filled for you, really. And so wanting to be intentional with that, and again, trying to lead people of others through teaching. So we're going to get into it with Dorothy here. And also, too, Dorothy is awesome. She is an award-winning math teacher educator. I had a conversation with her on the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, and I've known her for quite some time. We'll kind of go into our backstory a little bit. But she is someone that's not only hilarious, but an awesome scholar and just someone that I've leaned on to for advice and expertise for a long time. And so it made sense to have her on for this conversation. So without further delay, here's my conversation with Dr. Dorothy White. Dorothy White, thank you so much for coming to Amidon Planet. How are you?
I am well. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Yeah. This is so good. I was trying to remember the first time that we met. I want to say it was at some sort of, maybe it was at a retreat or something, or it was something. I remember like being a part of a group that was picking you up at an airport, but I don't know where that was.
Was that? I remember. Wasn't it in like Tucson or something like that?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
So I was thinking maybe it's a Miller thing.
Yeah. Or was it PMENA maybe?
It could be PMENA too. I don't think we get picked up for PMENA.
I just remember meeting you for the first, and like, it was like joke and like, I was like, I'm like, it was just so at ease. And just, it was like, oh, I want to get to know who Dorothy White is. And so,
that's so sweet. Thank you.
Cause then that was early on. Cause then pretty soon after that, I did an SEC travel grant, and I wanted to go to Georgia, and there was a complex instruction conference that was going to happen on the tail end of that trip. But then also too, I got to go spend some time with a lot of the math ed folk and at Georgia, and you were willing to welcome me in to your research group.
Well, I don't think you know, or I've told you, is that I didn't know anything about the SEC grant until you came.
Yeah, like, what are you doing here?
Right. I didn't even this grant. So I thank you for that. I think that's the beauty of meeting people and liking to be around people, is that you learn it's reciprocal, right?
Yeah.
And so then I went on an SEC.
Yeah. Where did you go?
Well, am I supposed to tell you, because I didn't go to Ole Miss? Yes, I went to Vanderbilt.
Oh yeah. Well, I went to Vanderbilt on my second one, so that's good.
Did you go? We could have covered. Yes.
There we go.
Oh, that's funny. That's
Yeah.
funny. So,
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I mean, and again, I think that's, we're going to get to talking about our journeys here, and you can't help but have these journeys that cross over each other and all these different connections. And then even just to realize that this world that we're kind of living in is a pretty small connected world. And so,
yes.
it can be supportive. It can be supportive.
It can be, but it does take intention.
Yeah, it does. It does. So Dorothy, and again, I'm the reason why I wanted to talk to you today. And, I kind of talked about it in the intro that I'll record later that I'll put before this. But anyway, the reason why I wanted to talk to you was just this idea of being a full professor. And so, in talking about support and collaboration, and I know that throughout my years of going from assistant professor to associate professor and now to being just recently announced being full professor, you get help along the way and you kind of have these ideas, but then once you get to full professor, it's not like there's a lot of literature or support or even websites out there like, hey, here's what it means to be a full professor, and even to explain to others. And so wanted to have just a conversation about it and just to see like, well, what does it mean now, especially given us that we're in math education and we're in Amazon plans about learning how to teach better. Well, what's the role now in learning how to teach better or supporting people learning how to teach better?
And I don't think we do a good enough job preparing associates to go up for full.
Yeah.
Like that's a big gap. Like we spend, when you think about it, at the new job, you're getting mentoring committees and all of the stuff to get to. And then there's this void as if
Yeah. Right. And then because even too, like it's a very limited group that you can even talk to about it. Cause like, talking to my family, like, I thought you were a professor.
Even the whole thing on full, whether you put full, like you don't put full in front of it, but we all call it that. And I remember full professors here, like we don't have, we don't put full. And I'm just like, well, it says it in the documents.
That's right.
But I guess we've arrived because we don't have a qualifier. We're just a professor now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Like were we half? Were we 3/4? Like,
right. What was that?
Yeah.
I think that's the shift. And then, like you were saying, there are different roles.
Yeah.
And you're not always prepared for them.
Yeah. Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's back up because I wanted to share, and we're going to kind of do some mutual sharing of our journeys from where we were, maybe just in educator land, like our beginning path, to then getting into academia and going from there. And so, how did you start in education, Dorothy?
How did I start? It's interesting because I didn't start in education.
Hey, all right, there we go.
Right, I did a stint one summer teaching pre-K. Loved it, not really. But my degree is in mathematics. So I didn't even know there was this field called math education. So I didn't it was after I got the degree, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so I worked in advertising.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I know. This, I told you when you asked me, I'm like, my journey's not like, but then I'm finding a lot of people have gone different routes.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I did that for a while. And I just took this job at American Business Institute, teaching people where my major was math, my minor was computer science. So I did some things like that. And I was deciding whether to go for a master's in statistics or math education, because I heard about this thing called math education.
Yeah.
And one of my students, and these were adults, it was a night class, they were wanting to learn word processing skills. And they're like, well, you're pretty good at this teaching thing. You should go into it. And I was like, huh. And then I went and I got a job at I applied for a computer science master's and I didn't get in. So I was so devastated. Yeah. The City College in New York, they had a really competitive program. And so as I'm crying, I was like, enough already. Is that the top school in New York? And I said, no. She says, well, when the top school says no, then you cry. Until then, you have no tears. And
Hmm.
so I said, well, I'm going to apply to work there and then I can learn. And so I applied for Columbia. I worked in Columbia in journalism department, which is,
Wow.
again, nothing to do with math. And you could go for free, but you had to get in.
Mm.
Like, oh, crap. So I went to Teachers College. I got in. I was like, oh, I got in. And that's when I did the master's. And then from there, I wanted to leave New York. My mom passed away, and it's just, I didn't want to stay in New York anymore. And so my advisor from undergrad told me to contact Dr. Johnson at the University of Maryland. And he said, well, tell them who you are and tell them you met me and, you know me and all of these things. It was great. And I think my GPA was like a 3.8. I was like, I'm sorry, I don't have a 4.0. I really wanted a 4.0. And he says, well, I think we might have something for you here in Maryland. And I packed up and I moved to Maryland, and here I am.
Yeah. Wow.
And so it's this interesting journey. But I think it's really important when we get to talking about, it helps me think about it when I went for full. You have to recognize that sometimes your journey is, I'm not going to ever do it the way everybody else does it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And being comfortable in that space. And for a while, it was like always trying, like, I'm behind or I'm this. It's like, I just do it a different way.
Yeah. Well, and just to compare, my path was, I was computer science going in, was thinking about, going to do computer science. And then I did a summer job, which had nothing really to do with computer science. But I thought it did. It was like, doing manual labor at a place that made suspensions for hard drives. It was really odd. And, but anyway, I was like, nah. And I thought, what do I want to sit in front of a computer all day? And then got into, I was a counselor at Badger Boys State. So Boys State and Girls State, that's the American Legion sponsored government program. It's anyway, and you work with a lot of teachers there, right? Because a lot of teachers would be, could have the week off to go give it to that program, teachers and administrators. And just, there's something there about working with high school age kids and then getting to interact with these awesome counselors as well. And eventually it felt like that was a pull. And 5.5 years later, I had my math education degree from the University of Wisconsin.
Nice.
and was good at, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. And I thought that was going to be it for the next, 30 years. My wife nudged me towards this master's program because, when you get your master's, you can get a pay raise. And he's like, hey, that's probably a good thing to do. Get that upgrade. And so did that. And then during that, I got, similar to you, got the, shoulder tap and said, hey, you should go further, keep going with this. And so I applied and had a great conversation with a professor, Mary Louise Gomez.
And we remember that person, right?
Yeah. And then that shoulder tap led to getting in the program, and it really, and so then started my journey in a doctoral program and figuring out, like, okay, I'm going to get this degree. Well, what the heck does that mean when I get the degree? Like, did you have any idea like what you were going to do with this?
No.
PhD?
I didn't. I trusted my undergraduate advisor. I trusted my, doctorate advisor. I was fortunate in that the first year, what I really wanted to focus on was the remedial math college student. So I did all of my work in my master's because someone said, do your work in my master's and then, you go on the PhD, you already have that. And so when I got to Maryland, I had a fellowship, Patricia Roberts Harris Fellowship, but it was like $10,000. And I also worked in the Learning Assistance Center, right? And part of it was working with this requisite course, a math confidence course for people who have to take the remedial math course in college. Like, this is perfect. This is my dissertation. I'm going to do that.
There you go.
And then my advisor said, well, there's this opportunity to work on this grant with Pat Campbell. It was her impact grant. And it came out the same time Quasar. So impact was elementary and Quasar was middle school. And I didn't want to do it. I just resisted. Like, I worked pre-K. I did summer camps. I don't like the short legs. And and he kept saying, this is a great opportunity. And it was a great opportunity. I surrendered. I had to give up the learning assistant service job and worked with this great model of preparing teachers, and it dealt with equity stuff. And I didn't really know about that either. Like, who knows about that in math departments?
Yeah.
But I had to spend more time in schools because I didn't have enough experience.
Right.
So that's how I got more of my experience in elementary school classrooms. And then eventually did my dissertation in third grade classrooms.
Awesome.
So it was there learning. I learned everything about PD, working with teachers, respecting teachers, being in classrooms, but like I joke, but not having to do lunch count. Like, I don't have to do those things, but so that was important.
Well, and you said Pat Campbell, which I mean, which that kind of dings for me. Like, I can't like working with Pat Campbell. I mean, and that's the thing about we there's again, math ed, small place, but still like you hear these names that come up that cross people's paths, and thinking about too, like just even to the weird kind of world of getting your PhD where, hey, and I'm assuming you got your tuition taken care of for working within these programs and on the grant. And so like, hey, you kind of like, okay, they're going to be taking care of my tuition. And so it's like, what am I going to do? And to do that, and like finding a good fit for you and your interests, or even too, like you said, like an exploratory sort of thing where, hey, you didn't really know if you really like working on this grant. I remember I started working as a teaching assistant for the inclusive education class at all of the education majors at Wisconsin.
Nice.
So that's where I started. And I was like and part of my job was trying to find these placements where all of our candidates had a chance to work closely with a student with high needs. Cause in Madison, it's fully inclusive school district where, the least restrictive environment was in the regular ed classroom. And so but they needed support. And so like some of our, student teachers would go in and provide that support. So it was amazing program, but it was like working like a lot of emails, like saying, hey, this is what we're trying to do, trying to set up and trying to find placements for everyone, kind of, structured that way. And then eventually getting to a point where, all right, you're going to go supervise math teachers, and you're going to, because in Wisconsin, they had a law that you had to have a license to do that, and I believe to teach methods. And so, and it was limited number of people that had those, credentials. And so I got to teach methods. I got to supervise student teachers, and then that was kind of my roles as I worked through the program. And so, but yeah, then you're kind of trying, it's almost like you're trying on these things, like you're saying, like the PD and the school visits, and like, you think about how much that's influenced you and your path to where you currently are.
Right. You don't think so back then. How it's all going to fit together. It's like you have this puzzle, you have the pieces, but you don't have the box. So,
that's a good one. I like that.
I know they come together, right? Or I wouldn't have gotten these pieces, but you don't really have the box.
Yeah.
And and some people do. Some people are very clear and it works out really well.
Yeah.
They have the box and everything, but I don't know if the journey is as fun. I'm going to be biased. I don't know if it's as fun. Yeah. It's probably less tears, but
Well, it's like, you hear about some stuff from across campus or something like where someone's working in a chemistry lab, and they know they're part of this big grant, and they're going to be working with these test tubes at this spot in this lab, probably for the next 4 years. And then they're going to write a dissertation that's on those test tubes. And then they'll be, and that's it. Versus, even too, like I was a part of the DIME Diversity in Math Education Center for Teaching and Learning, or Center for Learning and Teaching. It's the one of those, and it was associated with UCLA, so University of Wisconsin, and UCLA, and Berkeley, California. It was at the tail end of it, and they were still having a few of these like retreats or things. And I got Meg Meyer put me on as like I called it a dime groupie. Eventually, I think she called me a dime associate, but she's like, "Hey, come along." Basically, it was come along.
Nice, yeah.
And so, getting to meet all these people like Joy Spencer and Dan Beatty, and all the people that Anita Wagger and like all these people that were a part of this group, and again, the list could go on of all the different folks that were a part of that. But then that got me to think like, hey, there's things that I've done in my own teaching that they're talking about as being important that other people need to know about. And so I was like, well, maybe that's where my path is going to take me. And it's interesting how, again, I love that idea that you got pieces, but you don't have the box. You don't know how's this going to fit together. Very nice. So then what led, so when you wrapped up your degree, then what led to the next step?
Well, I didn't wrap up my degree.
Oh, okay.
This job came up.
Oh, okay.
And, again, I'm never going to do it the way everybody else does. I thought, so I kept getting the flyer for Georgia has this position. I didn't really know anything about Georgia. I'm not a Southerner. Didn't know, I had a life. Like, I don't know, I'm going to live in this, DC metropolitan area. My husband worked in Virginia. So everyone kept putting the flyer in my mailbox. Right. So I thought I was not going to get an assistantship next year. And
they're saying you go,
but they didn't
move
say,
on.
like, no one said it, those unspoken rules, but no one's really, it's funny because when I went back later, I said, I thought you were kicking me out. Like, nobody was kicking me out.
Nobody's
just thought you would be good for the job. So.
And what was the job? What was the exact job that you were applying for? He was
assistant professor of math at UGA, and they were one of the few, which I learned later. I mean, you read about, like, you read Steffi Kirkpatrick's, Cooney's work, but it's like, okay, didn't make the connection. You would read people, but I really didn't read like where they were from.
And what Dorothy's saying, Georgia is a big name in math ed. Yes.
It was one of the first to have a department of math ed.
Yeah.
So I came down saying, all right, I'll do the interview. The nice thing is when you don't really think you're going to get the job or even want the job. Like, I don't know anyone down here. And you could just be yourself. And so pretty much myself. And I was prepared. So Maryland did prepare you to be able to, we did practice runs and they knew, the Maryland people knew the people here.
Yeah.
Right. So it was Anna Graber, Jim Fay, Martin Johnson, Pat Campbell, all these people, they knew.
Oh, yeah.
So they told me, well, when that person asks a question and that person asks a question and don't say anything on that. And so I took it with the grant and they offered me the job. I left on Friday. They offered it on Monday. I was like, oh, now what? Because I wasn't finished.
Yeah.
And so I took this job ABD.
ABD, all but dissertation.
Yes, which was interesting because a lot of other people took this job ABD too. So they're like, oh, that's what we do here. They since stopped. There was one other person after me, and after that, they were like, this is, because it really does take a lot of time. So when I came here, we were also converting from quarters to semester. So we met every week and no one said, you don't have to come to meetings. So I felt, again, when you just don't know, I felt obligated. Like I didn't think I could ask. Yeah. Can I just finish the dissertation? So it was interesting because people here would read part of the dissertation and then I had to send it to my advisor. Yeah. It was, so I came here, I was temporary assistant professor. because you can't be assistant without the PhD.
Right.
And then once I did that, then I got into the real position in track.
How long did it take you to finish?
It took a year and a half.
Which
And
I can't
also,
imagine starting a job and then also all those transitions and then doing and even just moving your life.
And 2 little kids. I had a 3-year-old
Oh my
and
goodness.
a 3-month-old. So it was like, yeah. And just trying to navigate that space. Also, the first Black woman ever in math ed.
Yeah.
So had all of that stuff going on. What do we do with her? Like, so it was a interesting learning curve for everyone. And it wasn't easy. So I delayed my going up from assistant to associate to the last minute because, making up time.
Yeah.
And trying to do it. And so, it worked out.
Yeah.
On appeal, it worked out.
Yeah.
And, but again, that associate was that. And then the next thing, which is really the talk here, is about full.
Yeah.
So, Joel, what was your journey?
Well, I had to, so I basically applied to every job from Hawaii to New Hampshire.
Really?
Like that, I have like a list of like 28 jobs, to the point where I kept telling some people like, hey, you might get a request for a letter. And like, they'd say like, Joel, stop, you'll get a job. Like, try.
You will. That's right. It's true. That's right.
Yeah. And eventually like Mississippi and Ithaca College were 2 positions that, and actually I visited Maryland. And so I was visiting Maryland for a postdoc with Dan Chazen. And that was something. And so like was leaving that, felt good about that. And then when I got on the plane, right when I get on the plane, I got one offer. And then when I was getting off the plane, I got another offer on my voicemail. And so it was like, okay, now we got to make a decision, and ended up being Mississippi. Felt like the best place for me to go. But I'll say this, part of like you're talking about the preparation that Maryland gave you, and like, okay, the people that they know and the networking, and then also too the knowledge of who's going to be interviewing you and whatnot. I mean, didn't really have that because in hindsight, like there was Barbara Doherty was here, Angela Barlow had just left, but like they were not here at the time, and I think that's maybe why there are the openings. But there was the preparation that Wisconsin gave me of like, hey, I'd seen a number of job talks, and they gave you so much, opportunity, and like just the amount of presentations and making sure you knew your stuff. Like I felt so prepared on that end. But then too, having also, some connections that I wasn't quite aware of at the time. And this little backtrack is I was a field test teacher for Core Plus. And then during that, I got to interact with Jim Fay. And so, like at the hindsight, you're like, oh, this is just a guy who wanted me to pull up the March Madness scores when we were sitting next to each other in the field test teacher meetings. But then also too, it's just like, oh, wow, Jim Fay, he knows a lot about math ed as well.
Yeah. So you realize, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, all these different experiences and people that I had a chance to interact with led to, I think, finding a good fit here at Mississippi. And then it comes, and then, you get into the position and you're talking about going up to associate, and the things that I was taught to do at Wisconsin, where it was like, you're going to take a project and that'll be maybe a poster proposal, and that poster, that idea for a poster then becomes eventually a research proposal maybe a year later. And then it becomes, you could do a research piece and a practitioner piece. And it's like, take that idea and you squish it like a lemon and get as much juice out of it as possible to make your lemonade. And, so it was a fairly, and also too, things here, and this is where there may be some difference. I know the things that count, right? The things that count at the University of Mississippi I think are different in other places. So when I say count, is like, they talk about how many publications or, research presentations you have. And sometimes I know at like Wisconsin, the rumor was, and I didn't know because I wasn't in a job there, but they had to be top tier single authored research articles versus here, like if I did a practitioner piece in like math teaching in the middle school, or even these podcasts were things that people liked and saw as productivity. And so like there was a difference in what counted. So like getting towards, and I didn't start the podcast till after I got associate, but getting to associate, like the stuff that I did for PMENA and things I did actually with others were all smiled on. You know, they were like, great, hey, publication's a publication. And so that felt like I was really prepared for being productive here to move then from assistant to associate.
Yeah, for me, it was hard. I did not get good mentoring. Just they weren't. I have felt, and I still to a certain degree, you were checking off something. There was this initiative going on in the college to diversify. But it wasn't really designed to get us to stay.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't. Like no one said, I think like career grants are really hard for me because no one told me about a career grant until I couldn't qualify.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So when you break this, someone, I don't know who I'm going to give credit for this quote, but when you break this glass ceiling, there are a lot of cuts. We don't talk about a lot of the cuts that you get from that. So it was people. I was good enough. I was smart enough to have connections outside of the department. They weren't doing equity stuff. You know, it was funny when I interviewed someone saying, well, you got to be one of those equity people. I was like, if they put on my tombstone that I'm an equity researcher, I'd be happy.
Yeah.
But that's not all I do. But it just got positioned. I took the job anyway. It's crazy. So there was this, is that even a real thing? We don't know what that is. And so we can't help you. I mean, they didn't. They really didn't. I found people in the college that were helpful and people in the field. So for me, conferences, and they still are these healing spaces where I get to learn something about how to navigate the academy.
Yeah.
And I did. So I had really good people in other departments that were teaching me what to do. Even though I had a mentoring committee here, I had two actually, because there was one someone said, "Am I on your mentoring?" I'm like, I don't think so. You're not, right? You are, were. But so that was interesting, and it was hard.
Yeah,
it's hard because I tried to change what I do. Right? I said, well, maybe I'll just do something more in pre-service teachers, and it was Les Stepfy, who said, "You have no passion for this work. I don't know what else to do." Right. And so finally, eventually, so I don't think I look back and say, I wish I was more productive. I learned more about schools. I spent the time in schools. It validated what I did. It was important work. And I knew how to do it. So when I see people that are distracted by other things, it's like we all gravitate to things we feel we're good at or validated by. And if the work is constantly being scrutinized, it wasn't until later that, I met other people that I could do that. It wasn't like Maryland. It wasn't the same thing. So it was very hard. And I had kids, and most people didn't have kids.
Yeah.
And that wasn't viewed as a good thing. I had one more person say, "Wow, you're the best form of birth control." That's not a compliment. It's not. But yeah, so those journeys, but as someone said, but I made it.
Yeah.
First time, right?
Well, the thing is, like, I think about, you talk about mentoring, like when I did my SEC grant and came to Georgia and you let me sit in on your research group. I mean, that experience and then, subsequent conversations and things like that led to me doing similar things here that led to me producing with others that led to, tenure, or associate promotion and tenure. And it's like, And that, I guess too, I guess that points out like these mentorships are not, like you talk about the one that you're given versus the one that you seek out. I guess there's a
Yes,
big difference there.
yes. There's a big difference. And being with the grad students, knowing that they had a space that was the research group. And I think I don't think I know. I think the main reason why I'm still here is grad students. They weren't enculturated into thinking that what I did wasn't valuable. So they valued it. And so and I like being around people.
Yeah.
I'm a social person, as you can probably know.
That's right.
But also like helping and learning from people. It's just in that space, you can learn from anyone if you just listen. And so that's what has been nice to be able to, when you're not in the club, and you make your own club.
Yeah.
And because we had the graduate students to do it, it was really nice to be a part of them and helping them learn to collaborate and teach each other.
Well, that was a cool thing, is like that environment that you created when I came in, like it was very welcome to sit there and listen, but then also like, you turn, what do you think, Joel? And like, like, I just got here, but hey, I got something to share, but I got a question to ask.
And like, it was just great. Yeah. Because we need that outside to look at us and see, is this making sense? Because it's sounding good to us.
yeah. We're doing great. So then we get to a point where, I don't know, I guess I'll just say my own nudge to go up for full. It was I had someone I work with pretty closely here, Dr. Ann Monroe. She's been on the podcast several times. And we've done a lot of work together. We're like, hey, let's go up together. Let's do it. And then we talked to some folks about whether or not that was a good idea. You have to see, like if it, we'd be, possibly, kind of testing the waters a little bit. And then we decided to go ahead and put it in. I don't know, like, did you get like a nudge, or did you investigate?
I got a nudge from people outside my department. And so it was interesting because the college's track record was not good when it came to people of color. Almost when I went up, and for the years around that, everybody had to go up a bill. I mean, the College of Ed was notorious for not promoting people of color on the first try.
Wow.
That changed. We had a different dean, things like that. We merged in different departments, which was also helpful. So it's people outside of the department that said, well, when are you going to go up? And I really didn't think that was in my future. I just didn't think about it. I was like, no, because I think what happens is people, and when I mentor people now, they think there's this magic number, or they think full is you've arrived.
Yeah.
Right. And you're the top now, and then you can go off into the sunset. And fortunately, I talked to really good people that said, no, the universe is not promoting you to full to then say, and go on your merry way. They want to know where you are, what you're a leader in, and then where you're going next. I was like, oh, I got plans. So in 2012, I started the journey, and I had this outside person, but I never really got a sense from my department that was something that they were going to support. It's like, yeah, okay, you can do that. Oh, that's nice. You need that, or talk. It was always some reason not to. So I said, I'm not doing it. Forget it. It's been people. And then 6 years later, after that, so it's like, the average for women of color is like 13 years in rank from associate to full.
Wow.
It's like, wow. Okay. Well, that's a terrible number. And I had someone in science ed who I guess looked at my post-tenure review stuff and said, you should really, think about going up. I said, man, no, I don't have enough of this. I don't have, I can tell you all the things I don't have. And I
Mm.
think from associate to full, a lot of people talk about what they don't have
Yeah.
instead of what they do have, right?
Right.
This engine makes you think that you have to apologize for what's missing, especially at an R1, um, as opposed to what is there and reading the standard. And she said something that I never heard at the University of Georgia. She said, "You've done the work and I'll support you."
Mm.
Never heard that. That was the first time I heard it in 2018.
Which is important because, like, you need to, and like, for those that don't know, like you're being basically voted on by those in that
Yes.
role, right? And so the support is necessary.
So when you have people even outside of your department that, I don't know if you're going to be on a college committee or university committee, but that first vote is in the department.
Mm-hmm.
So to have someone in the department to say that, of course, I push back like, I think you should look at my record again. I'm like, no, and I'm really taking the time, and I have a great community of people, my writing sisters. We're not, and they're not in my department. And so another one, Kuali, we were both going up and we both say, no, we don't have enough. No, we don't have enough. And we helped each other do that. How do we network? How do you find the people? And then someone, a department head in another department said, you could be an example for someone else. Mm-hmm. And I think that's when I said, yeah, there are people who have been associate for a long time who really, they want to do it. They've been talked out of it. They've been overlooked. As people used to say, oh, if you haven't done it in X amount of years, we write you off, you'll never do it. And there are people, and going back to, I'm never going to do it the way everybody else does it. Mm-hmm. What makes this different?
Yeah.
And so I mentor a lot of people in that. So so that's how it went up.
Yeah.
Put my name in, took it out, put it back in, and just did it, which I'm glad I did.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the nerve-wrackingness of it, I mean, it's kind of weird where you're getting these people that are talking about you. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know, for us, it was a year-long process. It was like you wonder what they're saying, but again, eventually getting word that, okay, you've moved on, you've moved on to the next level.
Right.
Yeah. Now fight the next big boss. Here we go. Yeah. Felt like a video game.
But I don't know about you, Joel. When I was putting my packet together, someone said to just reflect on who I am. What do I believe? And I just took the time to just write that down.
Yeah.
And just, what do I believe? I believe every child should be supported. I believe in this. I believe in that. And then look at where have your beliefs shown up on your CV and the work that you do. And then writing from that was different. Like, no one could say, it wasn't about numbers anymore. It was about impact. It was really about what I felt was representative of what I really believe and why I came into this field. And so that was cathartic and worth it. Mm-hmm.
Well, that whole idea of taking all that you've done, putting it together, and then so it's like, what's the story? So I'm saying, what's the story that it's telling? Yep. Not only what is it telling, and also too, where's it going? Right?
Where's it going? Yes, yeah.
And that's been the thing that I've been thinking about ever since since got the letter, is thinking, well, where given all this reflection and where is this going? And so what was the clarity that you had in putting together your packet and then going out and then thinking well, where's Dorothy White going?
Well, I decided there were things that I still hadn't done yet that full would allow me to do it without the pressure of worrying about doing it for full. Right? Because now I can do it. So when I was reflecting on what do I believe and what have I done, that's why, because you have to make your story.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the decisions I made. I made that decision. I worked with that school district with those teachers because I needed to learn this and making those connections. And so finally realizing, wow, there's this other area of work I want to branch into. And I don't have to think about full as I'm done.
Mm. Yeah.
So I met with the associate dean here for faculty services. And he's like, we really want to know, tell us about the 5 years previous and the 5 years going next. And that makes sense, right? Where are you going? And so, but it was a nice journey. So for me, that was the being able to freely think about what's next.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's very cool. It's very cool.
Well, that's the thing. I think about the things that I'm good at that I like doing. You know, like working with I think we both have a passion for working with graduate students, but then also too just and getting them to see like the potential of what they're interested in and how that can broaden their impact on their area of influence and whatnot. And just thinking about that and other projects and things I'd like to do. And so the idea of what does it mean to be a full professor, it's weird in the fact that you got a PhD and then you kind of drop to the bottom of a totem pole and then you're moving up, but then thinking about, well, how can you help others have a better experience in that world? Like you talk about mentoring other people and helping them get through these different processes, because it is different. It's just a weird world. And even too, it's different. The process is different here as it is at Georgia, and like all these different ways that we can provide value to folks and to show them that, hey, you have enough. You have enough.
Yes, that's right. And I did a faculty success program. That was another great experience that I had. Which was really, and there's a session that we do in it on the book of many chapters. So if you had to write your academic life in 5-year chunks, what would be the title of that chapter? Right. And so then you kind of had to think about, so full going up for that. What was that chapter? What's the next chapter after that? And I think the advice that I would give is start reflecting on what do you really believe? Because as you know, Joe, you don't have to go up for full.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people are just content. Like, I don't want to go through that part of it. You don't have to. And that's what makes the time can go longer. You can do all of that because some people think, oh, that means I have to take on more responsibility in my department, right? Or I have to do other things. That's not really what your standard says. Like your standard doesn't say, and when you get it, we expect you to now be an administrator.
That's right.
So best advice is, what is the standard at your university? What are they expecting? Can you see yourself? If someone asks you, did you do that? Did you do that? You didn't do everything, or how did you do it in your way?
Right.
And then more importantly, how does it help the university to promote you?
Yeah.
Right. What is it that they're going to gain by promoting you? You got to get to keep you if you want, right?
Yeah.
But that, I think, is the hardest thing, because assistant to associate, you have to do it. You're on a clock. It's going to tick and it's going to expire. Where this one doesn't.
Yeah. Because if you don't get that one, then it's like, well, you can go find another institution.
Yes.
Versus this one. Yeah. Like you're saying, you could stay at associate or you can default. But then, so I guess when you think about what does it mean to be a full professor, or what are the roles and responsibilities that I kind of already pointed out some, like this idea of mentoring and, helping others navigate the process. And then we also talked possibly about, taking on leadership. That could be something as well. What other roles and responsibilities do you see?
You write a lot of external review letters. I'm like, oh man, you got to do it for associate and for assistants. So you get some of that. I think
people appreciate that.
It's true, but it's like, um,
And I guess that's something, just for those that don't know, I think my mom might listen to this. So just to explain the process is that you basically, you as a full professor, for other people that are getting like are trying to go for full professor, that people will send, or other institutions will send you like the package that they've put out there. It's someone that you probably haven't worked with directly on something, but then having looking at what they're, what they've done, what they've done throughout their, from associate to now applying for full, and saying whether or not they would meet the expectations of your institution.
Right. And ours, and we don't know who writes our letters.
Yeah.
So we don't get that. But also this idea of, and it's harder at full because if you are, for us, the full is leadership in the field. Well, if you're a leader in the field, people should know who you are.
Right.
And so in some way, whether they've met you personally, they know your name. Like so what circles are you in that they can know your name and they think you did good work. I think that's it. I think for me, there's also an institutional history that's important to be able to share.
Say more about that. What do you mean by that? Institutional history.
There are things like, and not many of us have been at that same job, right? A lot of people move, but you and I have been. So we've seen certain things come and go.
Right.
We know certain things. So there's an ebb and flow. So teacher education programs are down. The numbers are down. That's across, right? So what do we do? What have we done in the past to recruit people? Because when it's good, we don't look at that the same way.
Right.
Okay, so there's that history of, well, we recruited people. What do we recruit doc students? What are we trying to do for doc students now? How are we looking at, for example, what are some of the needs of our alum that said when they graduated, they wish they did more of that? So there's that history that you can share because you know a lot of the alum. So feeling comfortable to share that. I think another big thing is making space for the next generation, right? Being able to hear and give voice to a voiceless without speaking for them.
Yeah.
So I think giving them their voice and also helping to take the mystery out of this thing called the academy.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, and the grind and all of that stuff and helping people create that balance. I think that's important too. A lot of grad students we know, they come out, it's not a marathon. I mean, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Yeah.
So what are you doing to also fuel your soul? Right? So you can sustain this. And then what are you doing that's really not healthy? It's not healthy for you. All right. Why are you always creating a new syllabus? Right. Last year they didn't say this, it's new group.
Yeah.
Right. So how much of the tweaking or is it redoing or have you really thought about how are you budgeting your time? Are you giving it away or are you giving it freely? Is it at the expense of time to think about your work and your legacy? You think now legacy more so when you're a full.
Yeah.
What do I want people to remember me by? What kind of work? What audiences do I want to talk to that I haven't spoken to before? I think that's important. So pubs look a little different. They can if you want, right?
Right.
I want to talk more to this audience. I spent a lot of time talking to that audience. You can do that because you don't have the same thing at stake.
Yeah. Well, did you get any advice going into being full? Because that's kind of like, I just wonder about that.
I know.
Or advice, I mean, and you kind of given that too, but like, or what do you wish you knew?
What I wish I knew. You go first.
I got something. So I've got a colleague. He heard I got it, and he was very excited. But he also said too, to sit with it for a year, to, sit with it for a year and kind of thinking about, like, reflect a little bit about kind of like what you were saying before about, okay, what audiences do I want to speak to? What do I want to do? And not to put so much pressure on, like, okay, now is the going to do, but even to think a little bit about, I like your idea of, like, what's this next chapter? What's the title of this next chapter going to be called? And so, I like that, this idea of you don't need to rush into, make this commitment and go into this leadership role or whatever, but sit with it. And then just because you've got the rest to go from
there.
here.
I'm going to use that one.
Yeah.
Really stick with it. I think that was great advice. We tend to jump from one project to the next.
Mm-hmm.
We rarely take a time to even celebrate the project, right?
Yeah.
We're constantly working on a new paper, working on a new this, right? How do we have time to actually sit with it long enough to enjoy it, to say, good job, we did that.
So,
you did that.
So I turned 45 in October.
Oh, nice.
And so we're calling it the full 45,
full 45,
the full 45. So I used to have I call it the month of Joel, just to make sure everyone knows that October's the month of Joel. Now we're gonna have full 40, but I've got a couple concerts that I'm gonna go to celebrate a little, because it's like things that I would, because it almost was like graduate student to, get in the job. Like, I can't go do that. And versus, like you're talking about kids, like I had a kid that's now going to go off to college. And it was like, last year, it was like, should we go to a Grizzlies game on a Wednesday? It's a school night. We could, because this kid's going to go away and who knows when he's coming back. And so it was like, we're going to go to a Grizzlies game,
You
and
get
it's like,
to do those things,
but then also too, like that, like you're saying, those things that keep you healthy and keep you connected to the people that are important to you also is going to then pour back into the work too, to make that beneficial as well.
It shows up. You're not as stressed, so you can hear other people more.
Yeah.
You can hear yourself because you've learned to slow down long enough to listen. Yeah. I think that's great. I think some people is a little too, wound too tight. Like, I think at this stage, you have to be able to have better balance.
Mm-hmm.
Have to have better balance, right? Or you just burn out and you're just exhausted. I know someone who just went up and they're on medical leave now because of just all the stress.
Yeah. Grind. Yeah.
Grind that we never stop. Like, sit with it. I wish someone said sit with it for a year. But you have projects going on.
Yeah.
And how do we make more time to rest our bodies? Like, how do we listen?
Yeah.
What type of fool do you want to be? Do you want to be one of those? I think another thing is I don't want to be bitter.
Right.
Times I can find myself, if I'm giving too much of myself, that breeds resentment.
Right.
So have I given myself something that's going to be not work related or whatever? Being able to do that, because a lot of people are going to ask. You have more people asking you to do stuff. So also setting boundaries, I think, is another big one.
Yeah.
About, you know what? I'm going to take the weekends off and I'm going to mean it. Just going to mean it. Like, it's going to do it. And when I come back Monday, it's a new week. So little things like that. You give yourself license. I like sitting with it.
Yeah.
And advice. Yeah.
And like, I think too, and it seems like that the message that kind of coming through, let's help it be a better, whatever our experiences are, let's help the next generation have a better experience than we had navigating through, because we can all make this thing better.
We can, we really can. And like the person said to me, letting people know that you've done the work and I'll support you.
Yeah, that shoulder tapping.
That little thing is really important. It didn't start, well, let me help you. It started by validating that you did the work.
Mm.
Right? Because we want that thing. We want that sense of belonging. And a lot of times we feel like the academy is in a place where you can be in. In some places it's not. But it doesn't have to be limited to your program, for example. Are there other people at your institution? Is there another institution? Being able to help people think through options, I think, is another responsibility of folk.
Mm. Yeah.
To be, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Love it. Well, anything else? You've been very generous with your time. And did you have?
Hey, you're very good with time.
Yeah. Well, we start next week. I think you're starting now. So
we start this week. This is the week.
So I do appreciate your time. And actually I am taking, because I was looking at a syllabus being like, we could tweak the heck out of this. And like, maybe it doesn't need all that tweaking. Thank you. All right. I'll take that.
Yes.
But did you have any final words that you wanted to share, Dorothy?
I think people should do it if they're thinking about it. There are people that really don't think about going up for professor. If you're thinking about it, do it. Do it. Say, I'm going to find out where, and I'm going to do it. Because you're not going to lose your job if you don't get it. But you're not going to have this constant battle within yourself about, did I do enough? Make a plan. Have somebody read it over.
Yeah.
Think about whether this is a realistic plan. Get your people together that are your cheerleaders. And come on, join the club.
Yeah.
It's a club. Come on in.
Come on in. Come on in. Water's warm. Here we go.
Water's warm. Joel, awesome. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you just for, again, spending the time, and just also too, just for being someone that I've been able to connect with through the community, and just have a lot of laughs, but then also to have learned so much from you and your work within.
Ditto.
And I'm going to connect the listeners. I'll put in the show notes your episode of the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, because I really love that. We
nice.
had a chance to talk. I learned a lot during that conversation as well. So
thank you so much.
Thank you, Dorothy.
Right. Yes, you have a great day.
You too.
On purpose.
On purpose. Okay, there it is. There's Dorothy. I'm glad she was able to come on and share her, again, advice and expertise. And just, and also her humility. I mean, like when we, she's like, hey, like, I don't know, but maybe we just have a conversation. We'll figure this out. And it was like, I mean, that's the stance I want to have in this job. And so in thinking about it and going forward, I also, got some advice from some other folks. And so like, one of my, colleagues said that maybe this role means more meetings and people wanting to take on leadership, whether they're a good fit or not. So that's kind of something to be wary of. Like, again, once you have the title, people might start throwing leadership roles at you, and you have to think like, what does this really mean for me? And trying to, again, fulfill the aims that I have. Also, too, another colleague called this the full professor role best job in academia, but weird how you have to move through it, because, again, you start as a PhD, you have a terminal degree, right? You got the letters before and after your name, and then you kind of get moved into the lower rung of the totem pole there and have to work your way up, and like doing things that you think are pleasing to others, because you need to get their votes on whether or not that you can proceed and continue to be a colleague, but then also that you deserve the roles that you're applying for. So, but also too, on a lighter note, I kind of heard, I did hear Kevin Hart, the comedian, on the Smart List podcast. That's the one with Will Arnett, Jason Bateman, and Sean Hayes. Great, funny podcast. Lots of cool stuff that they did when they started that thing during the pandemic. Anyway, they recently went on a tour, and then they've been putting out their conversations with folks that they had on that tour on their podcast feed. And one of them was with Kevin Hart. And they kept talking about how successful Kevin Hart was. And like, he'd been doing like, 50,000 seat arenas and things like that. And like, he's had so much success, but then also too, he continues to grind and like he's doing the movies, he's continuing to tour, but then also too, he's got businesses and things that he's like trying to promote either, his own brands, but then also too, just helping out others. And, they asked him like, well, why do you keep doing that? I mean, you could like totally sit back on your laurels and just, do a tour every now and then and make a lot of money and whatever. And he had this to say. He said, that would be, could do that, but that would be selfish because there's people that put him into place to do what he's doing. And now he gets an opportunity to pay that forward. And so I think that's something to remember too. That felt like great advice, So thinking about, it took a long time to get from math teacher to graduate student to assistant professor, then associate professor and full professor. And there's a lot of people that contributed. Like, I just even think like, people had grants or whatnot and they said like, hey, Joel, would you want to be a part of this? Or like, hey, have you thought about this opportunity? Or, sending an email, just, hey, I think you should apply for this. Like all those different things that people have done for me on my path that without those, I would not be where I am today. Right. And so it's, there's a responsibility there. Yeah. You could just sit back and just go to the coffee shop every day and, start, just pouring into my own projects rather than trying to help others. And so, that's the thing. How do we help others move through that path and hopefully move through the path a little bit easier than it was for me? And again, I had a lot of help. A lot of people, poured into me and my development as a teacher of teachers. And so looking forward to doing that. Continuing to do that for others. I think I've been doing it and I want to continue to do that and hopefully get to do it better. And that's why we do the podcast, because we're learning how to teach better. And so thank you for listening to my rambles at the end here. Thanks to everyone out there who helped me out on this journey. And just thank you to anyone that's just listening. As is just, appreciate it. You have a lot of choices out there on what to listen to. You could be listening to SmartList. I would, because I listen to that every week. But thank you for listening. And if you want to contribute to the podcast, we're going to get a little bit more regular with our episodes coming up. But if you have suggestions, love the suggestions. We're trying to put those into play. We got a decent list that we're kind of working off of through the fall here. But we love future ones, because also when sometimes you invite someone on the podcast, they say yes, but it's a later yes. And so you got to fill in the gaps, right? So if you have any questions, comments, and or suggestions, you can send them to the mailbag at joel@amazonplanet.com. Again, that's joel@amazonplanet.com. And if you're looking for show notes in this episode, so for example, if you're listening, you want to get that episode of the Teaching Math Teaching podcast where Dorothy White talks about or kind of shares an outline about her her journey through math teacher education, her advice and expertise there, but also too she shared a talk at AMTE because she won the Karen King Award for Advocacy and Leadership. I believe that's the award title. Anyway, if you're looking for that episode of the Teaching Math Teaching podcast, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. You can find those at amazonplanet.com/episode 96. And if you're looking for other ways to support, again, send something to the mailbag, comments, questions, suggestions, joel@amazonplanet.com. You can also subscribe, rate, and review, and share this episode, which will allow more people looking for similar content to find it. A lot of people like that counseling youth episode. That was episode 95. That got shared and listened to a lot, so I appreciate that. As always, you can follow at Amazon Planet on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, or like the Amazon Planet Facebook page. Actually, that's not Twitter anymore, right? It's called X. Maybe I need to change my copy. In addition, you can subscribe to the Amazon Planet download, which is the email list, which contains teaching resources and updates from Amazon Planet. Anywhere on the website, amazonplanet.com, you see join the email list. That'll get you access to that list. We don't send it out too often, but when we do, it's usually something that we think is valuable. And finally, check out the Amazon Planet store, Amazon Planet Bookshop. Links are in the footer at amazonplanet.com, where your purchases support the production costs of the podcast. Finally, thank you for spending time on Amazon Planet. Thanks to Dorothy White for sharing their time and expertise. Thanks to Matt Mifflin for the music in this episode. And finally, thank you to all of you out there learning to teach better and be the good in the world by investing in the lives of others. This world is a better place because you have decided to use the gifts you have been given to serve others. Thank you for all that you do. Peace.